Hi folks, Lou here, and I'm going to talk briefly about conflict in games. And I'm thinking primarily of tabletop games, but this applies to lots of other games like video games. And of course, in video game, with a single player, you can still have a conflict with the game itself or with the computer opponent. So you can treat it as a two-player game in that respect, even though the computer opponent is not likely to be very good. So let's start with a quote from Greg Costikyan, who was well known for designing tabletop games before he moved into video games. For example, The Creature That Ate Sheboygan. And he is quoted as saying, "A game without struggle is a game that's dead." A game without struggle is a game that's dead. Now, struggle is an interesting term. And you can say, well, you can struggle against the game and not struggle against somebody else, and struggle can mean different things, but I think you get the generality of it. My version of this would be a game or a novel without conflict isn't a game or novel, it's something else. So to take the example of storytelling RPGs, where the players know that what they do doesn't really matter because it's going to go to the end that the storyteller, the GM, has ordained, and that they aren't going to get killed, that is the game that's lost the struggle. There may be a sham conflict, but in the end, there's no struggle. Now, a lot of this comes down to interaction. If there's no interaction in what we call a game, it's actually a puzzle. It has generally a always correct solution. Whereas games, by their definition, opposed games, some people would call it, traditional games, serious games, those games do not have a single strategy that always works. If they do, it's called a dominant strategy, and it's a no-no, it's a bad thing. So on the one hand, we have games, on the other, we have puzzles. Puzzles do not need to have a struggle. Puzzles do not need to have a conflict. They just need to have something you've got to figure out what to do to achieve a particular objective. To me, those are not games, but many people call them games. And of course, we can go to broader and say, when I go outside and play with my big dog, he's invented rules for games, more or less, and I play according to his rules, but it's not a game in the sense that a hobby game is. And of course, party games are not games in the sense that hobby games are either, or at least hobby games used to be. Nowadays, party games have moved into hobby games, and many hobby games are really party games at heart because there's not a struggle or there's not a conflict with other players. Now, the question then becomes which, as a designer, you want to do, because they're very, very different. And there are many people who will not play games where there's conflict, and there are many people like myself who will not play games where there's not conflict. And you've got to figure out what you want to design, and that's one of the first things you have to figure out when you're designing a game. Thanks for listening.